Hello, rock your world, Vashani. Welcome to Bedtime Stories. We are back. I need to make sure my chat is visible here. Let me see. Hello, hello. There it is. You can see the chat on the screen. I got my cards right here. We'll talk about that in just a second. First, how's everybody doing today? The background is real life. This is actually a camera. Boom, boom. See my hand. I am doing great. I'm excited to bring bedtime stories back to the stream. Ready to tell a good story with y'all's help. It'll be fun. First, just going to hang out a little bit longer, see who joins, see who wants to come by and say hi, maybe participate in the story making. Never participated. All right, let's go over a little bit of the details here. So, I'm going to tell a story. In fact, we are going to tell a story. I'll start off with a few particulars. I'll ask for the start of the story, and then we'll just start rolling into it. And then every once in a while, anytime you want actually, you can kind of call out different things you'd like to see. Maybe you want to see a dragon appear. Maybe you want to see something random happen to our protagonist. Maybe you want to see an encounter happen. Things like that. You can do it just randomly, kind of drop an idea into the chat and I'll roll it in as best I can. I try to use every idea. I can't always use every idea depending on how fast they're coming at me, but I can use most of them most of the time. But a lot of times what I'm going to do is prompt you. If we're coming up on an encounter or something is about to happen, I don't want to have to sit here and always determine what happens. That's not as much fun as having y'all help me determine what happens. It can be random, it can be foolish, it does need to be PG-13. We try to keep this somewhat family friendly. But it can be all kinds of things. It can be absurd. We do a lot with the fae, the fairy folk, things of that nature. A lot of times we end up with magic. We've done some steampunk, done some all kinds of things. It's been a lot of fun. And these are here just in case. This is called Story World. It's by John and Caitlin Matthews. These are story cards, mostly fairy-based and things of that nature. So if I really get stuck for something, or if I just want to throw something in random without any prompting or stuff, I'm going to reach into this stack here, and I'm going to pull out a card. And we're going to use that card to move the story forward. It'll either encounter somebody from the card or move to that location, or something's going to happen related to that card. And I think that'll be a fun way to kind of keep it moving, move it forward. Sometimes the participation is really, really all over the place. Sometimes it's people just want to listen to the story. Sometimes people want to actually really participate in the story, which makes it a lot of fun. But this stack of cards lets me appeal to everybody. So that if there's somebody just sitting back and wanting to listen to the story, I'll just be pulling cards out. But anytime y'all want to add to the story, you just drop it in the chat. It'll show up on the screen here. And we'll roll it into the chat and see what we can do. Like I said, I try to bring everything in. Depends on how rowdy the chat is. Sometimes there's just too many stuff flying at the same time. I can't bring it all in, but I try to bring in just about everything I can. With that said, Jason's face right here. Yeah, that's right. I don't usually have the chat on the screen. Everything's mirrored, so I'm trying to do this with the... There we go. I don't always have the chat on the screen, but this is a very chat-oriented show. So, definitely going to do that. So, let's give it another minute. Just kind of chill out, relax. How's your day been? Anybody following some of the E3 news? I think Cyberpunk 2077 just got a release date, but I need to double check and see. I know Keanu Reeves did the announcement, which was kind of cool. Because I think he's actually part of that game. It'll be nice. Every once in a while I might throw in one of these. Hello and welcome to the Underworld. We tend to have a lot of D&D inspiration in our stories as well, because we got a lot of D&D people that hang out at those calls. The Xbox part about Minecraft Dungeons, I missed that bit. I might have to double check that. Actually, I didn't really follow any E3 today, so I'm going to have to just kind of catch back up, find out the different curators I follow and see what they have to say about what's happening at E3. You loving the D&D? Now, the nice thing about D&D is you can tell any story in D&D. That's right. It just gives you a little bit of a deeper pool to work from. filling you in on the Minecraft stuff and whatnot. Excellent. Excellent. I think it's about time we got started. This is usually a shorter stream. We try to be able to tell a good story. If it's a short story, sometimes we'll throw in another one, that sort of thing. But we tend to run about 45 minutes on this particular show. Occasionally we pushed it, gone like an hour and a half or 2 hours when we're really on top of things. We've had stories and cliffhangers. We've had stories wrap up really nicely. We've had stories wrap up nicely, but we've revisited that world. I've got notes somewhere about some of the worlds we created, but we're going to start off with just something completely new. So, we're not going to revisit, Bones and the Rabbit and some of those other stories we had, or even our steampunk world and stuff like that. We're going to create a whole new world. And with that in mind, I need a location, kind of a general location. We're talking about like in the woods, on the ocean, in a big city, something like that. Is there a location y'all want to see this story set in? On the beach. I love it. And you know what? Every story needs a protagonist. So we need a protagonist on the beach near a valley. On a small island. So, kind of picture it. It's a small island, sunny beach, almost always temperate, mostly wooded. Kind of deep into the forest, you've got a deep valley. And that valley is avoided. There's a couple of tribes on this island. And the tribes kind of have their own territory. There's only 2 or 3, and they play nice with each other for the most part. No big tribal wars. There's enough on this island to feed everybody, and, they kind of live off the land. They throw lavish parties on the beach, mostly isolated. They don't get a lot of visitors and stuff like that. So, but there's one part of this island that nobody ever goes to. And that's the valley. It's dark, deep into the woods. People that go over there don't tend to come back. And that's a problem. So, all the parents and all the tribes warn their children, do not go to the valley. It's cursed. But we're going to start this story on the beach. Now let's say, who's on the beach? Is it a person from a tribe? Is it a castaway? Is it an animal of some sort? Who's on this beach? A castaway. Let's get a name for this castaway. Seagull is the name of the castaway. Seagull Wilson. Seagull Wilson was on a routine trip across a small portion of the Atlantic. And what does Seagull Wilson do for a living that had him on a boat? He's a tour captain, He kind of takes people around. He never lands on this particular island. He doesn't even usually come to this part of the ocean, but, he kind of changed his route a little bit. He was trying to avoid a storm, and he's taken a group of people around, and this unexpected storm pops up. And it's shaking his boat. It's not a very big boat. It's carrying about 4 or 5 people, and he's changing his pack course, trying to avoid the storm, but it comes on him. It comes on him so fast, he can't avoid it. And a big, giant wave comes by, comes over the top of his boat, and washes him into the water. Next thing he knows, it's bright and sunny, and he's waking up on this beach, on this island that we were just talking about. He's groggy, he's got sand on his face and his hair, in all kinds of unmentionable places, and he's very uncomfortable, very hungry. And he gets up and looks around. He sees a forest out in the distance, and he decides, you know what? It's temperate out here. I don't have to worry about a fire or anything like that. So I think I'm just going to go see if I can find some food. So he kind of travels into the deeper woods. Kind of creeps into the woods. Now, there's always people around and near the beach, but the tribes, they don't like outsiders, so they hide. And they keep an eye on Seagull Wilson. Sand always does, that's right. So, He goes into the forest and he looks up and he sees a coconut tree. And he starts to pick the coconuts and he climbs the tree, pulls one down, cracks it open, drinks the coconut water, eats the coconut meat, feels himself fairly satisfied, eats 2 or 3 while he's there. He takes his fill. He doesn't know what to do, so he decides he's going to go a little bit further into the woods. He doesn't recognize the island, but he wants to see if there's anybody about, because he noticed footprints on the ground. And he thinks, maybe there's people here. Maybe he actually just went back to the mainland and then washed up on shore there. So he wants to get to somewhere safe. And he's creeping through the forest when he encounters something. What does he encounter? What does Seagull Wilson see as he walks through the forest? A wild boar. It's rutting, and he comes up on it, and he just sees it from the back end. It doesn't see him yet, and it's just tussling into this tree and trying to get at something under the tree. And Seagull Wilson, he freezes. He doesn't know what to do with this boar. He doesn't want to get attacked and killed and mangled or anything else, so he just freezes. At which point, let's reach into our pile here. The fairy messenger. A small frog hops into the path, lands on top of the boar, and the boar and the frog turn around and they spot Seagull Wilson, who is just terrified, shaking in his boots. The boar gives a snort and paws at the ground a little bit, but the fairy messenger pats him a little bit, looks up, and says, "I've been expecting you." Reaches into his pouch and pulls out a piece of paper, hands it to Seagull Wilson, and then taps the boar, and they go running off into the woods, leaving Seagull Wilson with this scrap of paper. Now, what is written on this piece of paper? Enter the valley that haunts the natives. Into the valley that haunts the natives. Seagull Wilson reads it 2 or 3 times, trying to make sense of this. It's a calling. He feels it in his heart. There's something he needs to do. This kind of thing doesn't happen every day. And he runs after the boar and this fairy messenger that was sitting on the boar's head, trying to ask at least, where is the valley? And he chases him through, and he sees him like dart here and there, and hears rustling, and he just keeps going and chasing and chasing and chasing. And before he knows it, it's dark. I didn't think he'd been out that long to where it become nighttime, but he looked up, and the forest is thick, cutting out almost all the light. But way ahead in the distance, he sees a little glimmer. And he kind of slows his pace and he goes toward this small collection of lights he sees out in the distance. Maybe it's a clearing. Maybe it's some people from the mainland. Maybe he can get rescued. So he creeps up, kind of approaching the valley. Oh, spoilers. So he creeps up and he walks up, and then he stops with a gasp. And he just looks into the deep, dark pit. And on the other side, there are lights dancing. But down below is a very deep valley. Now, he's torn. He's not a great climber, but it's not terribly steep down into the valley. It's kind of gradually going, kind of wooded. Maybe get some trees to kind of help him down, stuff like that. He decides, you know what? Well, I've been called to go to the valley, so I'm going to go to the valley. And he creeps down and he pushes past one tree trunk and he goes lower and lower, and the heat gets hotter and hotter. There's no more breeze, no air can get down here, and he can smell it's musky, a little moist. You can definitely kind of feel moisture in the air and smell that must. He kind of creeps further and down until he hears another rustle, a little head in the distance, and he goes toward the sound, hoping to discover the messenger again, maybe ask him some questions, what am I doing here? But instead he finds something else. As the valley starts to go from pretty steep to level out, and as the valley levels out, he comes across a clearing in the wooded area. What does he find in this clearing? He looks around the clearing, and he swears he can see shadows moving, darting in and out of the trees. And in the middle of this clearing is a single bluebonnet. Long and blue little flowers on it. And he kind of creeps into it and looks, and he swears he sees something circling around the clearing. Shadows. More than one shadow. He stops for a moment. He hears nothing. It's silent. Not a bird chirping. Not a frog croaking. Not a rustle. The shadows either stopped moving or gone away entirely. He creeps into the center of this clearing to get a closer look at this single flower. And he reaches down and he plucks the flower from the ground. Not even thinking anything of it. He's like, look, that's a pretty flower. Pulls it out of the ground. What happened when he plucked the bluebonnet out of the ground? The ground started to shake. You're reading my mind, Rock Your World. I was kind of thinking the same thing. Suddenly, the shadows grew thick around the clearing. He couldn't even see the trees. And he looks at the flower, and the flower just dissolves into his hand. It turns to ash as if it's been burned. Yet there's no heat, and the ground underneath him shakes, and the soil loosens, and he starts to sink into the ground, and it shakes further, and he sinks faster, and he sinks faster until he's up to his waist, and he's sinking more. He's up to his chest. He's up to his neck, and he thinks this is the end, and then he's completely submerged in dirt. Everything is dark, and then he's falling and falling and falling. He looks around, sees nothing but darkness, and then boom, a streak of light. Boom, a streak of light. Then everything is lit up, and he sees luminescent plants all around him, and he's in a tunnel just falling straight down. And he looks down, and he sees a light at the end of the tunnel. And in that tunnel is a big pool of water, and then splash! He lands in this pool of water. It's really cold. Whew. Almost refreshing. Knocks him out. Wakes him up super much. And he gets to the bottom. He sinks real deep and then has to scramble his way up top, just gasping for air. Finally, he breaks to the surface of the water. And he looks around, and he's in a pool of water. Quite a large pool of water in this underground cavern, lit by luminescent mushrooms and plants and what look like bluebonnets, but they're glowing with an eerie kind of greenish blue light. And he looks to a small shore, and he starts to swim toward it and gets himself onto dry land. coughing and sputtering, and he lays there, exhausted. Then he falls asleep, completely worn out from the day's events. So Seagull Wilson, after making his way deep into the island and discovering the valley from the note of a fairy messenger, you entering that valley, picking a flower from that valley, and then suddenly being sucked underground. All of this was just too much. So Seagull Wilson, exhausted, falls asleep. So far, I'm liking this story. Seagull Wilson, the unexpected protagonist, tourista, washed up on an island, only to discover adventure. But of course, Seagull Wilson eventually, he wakes up. And he wakes up to a strange sight, looking around. What does Seagull Wilson see? Yeah, the shadows are definitely there. There's something to do with the shadows. Something to do with the shadows. They approached. Now, the question is going to be, was he pulled underground by, good magic, bad magic, freak of nature? Was the shadows that pulled him down? Or did somebody else save him? All he knows is that he is surrounded by frogmen, very similar to the deliverer, the messenger, let's say. All these frog people surrounding him all look very similar to the messenger in terms of their general build, type of frog, and stuff like that. And they're kind of gathering around him. But when he sits up, they kind of get startled and they jump back to kind of a crack, and they scurry off down into a tunnel. It's a fairly small tunnel, but it's not frog-sized. A man can fit through this tunnel, but he's got to stoop a bit, and he chases after the frogmen. And he works his way through the tunnel, trying to see them. He thinks he sees them kind of up ahead in the distance, and there's little bits of glowing foliage here and there, just enough to see by, but it's very shadowy and hard to tell where he's going. And finally, he gets out of this tunnel, and he emerges into this big open area. And he sits up, and he sees an entire village. Huge city, underground. And he's emerged into what looks like a trading area. Different stalls set up here and there. Lots of different creatures moving around, talking to each other. None that look human at all, but all look somewhat magicked or fey. And he's startled, and he looks around, and nobody even notices him. They just go about their business, and it's full of noise and hawkers yelling about their wares and stuff like that. And he looks ahead, and he sees the frogmen running down the center of this marketplace. And he chases after them. And as he chases after them, people are turning their head like, what is this? Who is this? What is happening? As this guy chases these frogs through the middle of the marketplace. But they've seen strange stuff in the marketplace before, so they just kind of put up the odds. Stuff happens, and they go about their businesses. He kind of runs by, maybe jostling a few people here and there. Then the frogs turn into an alley, and he turns with them. And it's a dead end. He looks around. And he sees a little door, about frog-sized. And he reaches down and he knocks on the door. Hello? Frogs? Can you help me? The door opens. Go away! Closes again. He knocks some more. Frogs, please, you summoned me. And he takes the note out of his pocket, soggy and wet, yet still in a decent shape. It's made out of a fairly resilient paper, and he slides it under the door. And nothing happens for a minute. Then suddenly, the door gets bigger. It starts to grow. Or is he getting smaller? He can't tell. It's disorienting. And the door opens, and he's ushered inside by two frogs. And he shakes his head and doesn't know what to think. And he looks around, and he sees a small room. Kind of like a small kind of inn room, a pub of some sort. And he looks around, and it's all frogmen sitting there having some drinks and eating some food and everything else. And everybody's silent as they see this human walk past them. And all the frogs are huge now. Or he's small. But they're all the same size as he is. He looks around, and at the very end of the bar, he sees the frog messenger, who promptly hops upstairs. And Seagull Wilson chases after him, goes upstairs, and follows him into his room. Come, sit. He does what he's told. We need a name for this fairy messenger. This frogman. Babar. Babar says, I am Babar. And we called you here because we need your help. We are the last bastion of the Fey folk. The last living survivors of a race that predates even the earth. Yet we are in danger. This is our last solace. Our last place where we can remain hidden from those that would destroy us. He pauses for a moment. He contemplates. Seagull Wilson goes, how can I help? We are plagued by shadows. Shadows. Wilson's eyes grow large, but Balor's like, you've seen them, haven't you? He nods. Balor's, that's why we need you. The Fae cannot see these shadows, yet they hunt us. You, as a human, can. For these shadows have an origin with your species. Seagull is taken aback. What can I do? I'm just a tour boat captain. But you're more than that. What makes this tour boat captain so special? Something about his ancestry? Something about his bloodline, maybe? Something about somebody he knows, something he's dealt with in the past, maybe an artifact he carries. What do y'all think? Aye. But you were born under the blood moon, were you not? So I've been told. Means you have a gift. You see, the Fae's magic is bestowed upon those that are born on the blood moon. For most people, it never manifests, but we can smell the magic in your blood. And you can use that magic to defeat our foe. These shadows that torment us daily. You see, we have to maintain the forest. We can't stay down in this underground cavern forever. This is just our marketplace, our city, our houses, and stuff of that nature. But the Fae, we must take care of the forests on this island, or we will soon perish. But our parties that go out to maintain the trees and speak with the dryads and assist in maintaining this area, many of them do not return. And much of the forest around this valley has been blighted. And we know who's to blame. The shadow folk. They are the shadows. They're part of the shadows. They blend in. We can't see them. They kidnap us. They kill us. They destroy our trees. We need you to capture them. And he hands Seagull Wilson a large gem. Seagull's eyes grow wide. It's the biggest gem he's ever seen. And it's got every color you could imagine. If he looks at it from one angle, it's a bright green, looks like an emerald. Looks at it from another angle, looks like a ruby. Looks at it from another angle, it's clear as a diamond. This is the Lightstone. With this, you may capture the Shadow Folk and end our torment. What do y'all think? Seagull Wilson gonna take up the challenge? Will he accept the rock? Heck yes. Of course. He's our protagonist. He looks at the Babar. Says, puts the stone in his pocket. Says, what do you need me to do? Babar jumps up and he says, okay, quick, to the armory. And he draws a circle on the ground, stands in it and beckons Seagull Wilson forth. As Seagull Wilson stands in the circle, it begins to glow, and suddenly Seagull Wilson can't see anything but a bright light. Then, as the light dissipates, he's in a completely different room. It's ancient and musty, covered in dust. He says, you'll need more than the stone to protect yourself. Here, take this. Now, the frog's normal size again, and he points up at a particular interesting piece of equipment. What is he offering Seagull Wilson? He points at what looks like an ordinary flashlight. Seagull grabs it. It's heavy. It's got some good hefts, and he turns it on. It's brighter than anything he's ever seen, but it doesn't hurt his eyes. It completely dissipates every shadow in front of him and does not cast any shadows of its own. Surrounding him is various pieces of old armor on stands, some rusty old weapons, things like that. And he shines the light on them, and behind them, on the wall, is nothing but light, no shadow. Because this light casts absolutely no shadow and penetrates all darkness. The Babar takes off his messenger pouch, sets it on the ground, hops back, and the messenger pouch grows to the size of Seagull Wilson. Seagull Wilson picks it up and puts it on, puts the flashlight, pulls the stone out of his pocket and slides it in there as well, and carries the messenger bag with him. But only you can open this bag. It is enchanted. So what now? You must go to the center of the labyrinth. With this, Babar draws another large circle on the ground and hops back and gestures for Seagull Wilson to enter the circle. Seagull takes a deep breath, reaches in, puts his hand on the flashlight for reassurance, and steps into the circle. The blinding light returns. And when it dissipates, darkness. He fumbles and scrambles and gets the flashlight out and turns it on. As he does, he sees the shadows disappear before him. But they don't just disappear, they seem to run, then scurry away. His heart's beating like nothing else, as fast as you could imagine. And he looks ahead, and he sees a giant shrubbery. A giant bush, and carved into the bush is an arching entranceway. And he creeps in, keeping his light on him. And he makes his way through the labyrinth. But the strange thing about this labyrinth, there's no forks. No changing paths. It's a big circle, and it's winding ever closer to the center. He can feel it. The circle's getting tighter and tighter, making its way to the center. There's no difficulty in finding the center of the labyrinth. As he gets closer and closer to the center, he feels the shadows pressing in on him. He sees them move and dart, and he sometimes spins around and flashes his light behind him, only to see the shadows dissipate in darkness. He feels this oppressive force just creeping closer and closer to him as he gets closer to the center. The hedges are 12 feet tall. He can't see over them. But he feels like there's a large shadow looming toward the center of this labyrinth. He walks slower and slower. His breathing is harder and harder, creeping forward. He reaches in his bag and puts his hand on the gem, making sure it's still there. And then the pathway ends and starts to open up, and he stops. He doesn't want to go into the center of the labyrinth. He can feel the shadows emanating from that. He feels like not even his flashlight is bright enough to penetrate the shadows that loom within the center. Fear presses down on him. and something happens to lighten his spirit. Just enough. Enough to give him that edge to push into the center of this labyrinth. What happens? To help reassure our Seagull Wilson that he may be able to battle this sinister force. He hears a voice, and it whispers a secret message. What's that message? Vashani, you got any ideas? Nope, you were distracted. We need a secret message to help reassure Seagull Wilson that he can brave the center of the labyrinth. Find the power within. Just a slight whispering in his ear. And he sees. You've always known it was there. And he just thinks inward for a moment. And his fingertips, they tingle a little bit. And he holds the flashlight, and it seems as if the flashlight has gotten brighter. And he creeps closer to the center. He shines the flashlight into the center, and he sees piles of jewels and stuff and random things. Spears, swords, helmets, shields, and random things. Bits of paper and gold and jewels and gems. Chests. It's a regular hoard. He shines his light across. But as he shines his light across, in the middle of the hoard, there's a portion the light does not penetrate. He shines his light up, and he sees the silhouette of a creature. A large creature. What kind of creature does he see? No. I'm already working that in, but I gotta know the creature first. No, I like it. Something similar to a Deathclaw. It's basically a large reptilian beast. You can see shadowy claws dripping with just more shadows. Oh. Looming in the distance. And he pauses for a moment, scared, witless, and he waits. He doesn't know if he's been seen. Coming up to the finale here, so I'll give Rock some time to make it back. But in the meantime, we'll talk. All right. So, this huge shadow, and suddenly he hears a voice, a familiar one, and a shadowy figure appears. It's his brother. He says, "Turn back. He'll kill you. We can't do this." Then another voice. His mother. "Don't do it. Leave." He's scared now. 5 people appear, and he recognizes them as the people that were on his touring boat before he was washed into the sea. He says, "Turn back. You've killed us. Don't make the same mistake." Flits and shadows of people he knew telling him to turn back, the fear overwhelming him. His flashlight, it starts to fade. The light gets dimmer. The shadows start to press closer. The big shadow takes a step toward him. The ground shakes, or at least it feels like it's strength. And he pushes toward him. It's coming from behind him. He turns around with his flashlight, and he feels like they're pushing against him. The flashlight, it doesn't go more than like 3 feet in front of him, and he feels them pressing closer and closer. He's turning around. He's getting disoriented. He's stumbling amongst coins and gems and stuff of that nature. He sees different pieces of glittering coins in front of him, and he stops for a moment, and a single teardrop drops down his face, and he's holding back, and the light is getting dimmer as the big shadow approaches, and he can see the giant maw approaching him, about to swallow him. And he lays his hand on something important in the horde. What does he put his hand on? He puts his hand on a hilt. He pulls it up. It's leather, beat up with strange symbols on it, slightly glowing. But it's empty. Or is it? He looks closer, just depending on how he looks at it. Sometimes he sees a sword, sometimes he doesn't. He takes his flashlight and he shines it closer. He feels a pull. He feels energy in his hands as he grabs the hilt in his left hand, the flashlight in his right hand, and he puts the two together. And then from within the hilt, puts the two together. The flashlight disintegrates into a beam of light, and the hilt forms a sword of pure light. And he holds it in front of him. And it shines everywhere. The shadows, they dissipate, except the big, looming shadow approaches him. And it gets closer and closer and closer. And he stabs at it, but it passes right through him. And it flinches in pain, but not much. And he scrambles back around to the other side, and he's being pursued. All of these little shadows start darting at him, and he swings his sword and slices them, and they dissipate and disappear. And then he remembers the gem. He reaches into his messenger bag, and he puts his hands together. And on the hilt, the gem fuses with the sword, and the sword becomes a sword of every color imaginable, and the light shines around, and every little shadow around him just disappears until just him and the gigantic shadow in front of him. He can see he's got the upper hand. He approaches him. The shadow swings at him, knocks him down. The sword scatters into his hand, and he hears it, ting, and it starts to dim and fade as he lays into that, and he feels the shadow approaching him. and he can see this. He can see where the sword had landed, but its light is starting to dim. And it's a good 6 feet from him, but he starts to crawl on all fours. And then he feels a weight on his back as the foot of this giant, shadowy creature presses him into the gold. And gems that surrounded him, different bits and pieces poke him. He hears a rib crack, and he screams out in pain. And he reaches his hand out, and he just calls, just pulls, and suddenly he sees it glow brighter. And he reaches his hand further, and the sword grows brighter. And suddenly, it dematerializes, goes completely blank, and suddenly it's in his hand. This bright light of sword, and he takes the sword and he stabs it straight up. And it pierces the chest of the shadowy creature. Lights, tendrils of lights, just snake across the death claw's body as it becomes more and more. And these little tendrils of light, they start off kind of dim, and they work their way around him, and it looks like he's almost burning with this bright, white, fiery light. And the light starts to change colors. It becomes red, and then blue, and then green, and then it begins to burn and get wider and brighter until it shatters into a million little dancing lights that fall and fade all around him. Seagull Wilson collapses on his knees. All is dark around him, but there's no more menacing presence. He takes a deep breath, reaches in his messenger bag, and pulls out the flashlight. Turns it on. Fills the room with light. He draws a circle on the ground. Doesn't know what he's doing. Just hopes it'll work. Shines the flashlight at his feet. And suddenly, the flashlight turns back on exactly. He sees nothing but a bright light. And he reappears in the room, in the armory with Babar. Babar, tears streaming down his froggy face, crying, "You did it. You did it, you ugly bastard." The end. All right, that was a fun story. Hope y'all enjoyed it. That, everybody, is bedtime stories. That's what we do. We just keep telling the stories. We see where it takes us. We see where the chat takes us. We see where the cards take us. And I think we had... No, he defeated the shadow monster. Now, it's a bit of a cliffhanger in that the world still exists in our mind. So, he defeated the shadow creature, saved the Fae from that threat. But we still have these lingering questions, right? How much power does Seagull Wilson have? This Fae magic that runs through him. Will the Fae be threatened again? You know, the whole world, it still exists, and we come back and see what Seagull Wilson is up to. I mean, will he really be content to go back and become just another tour captain on a boat? Now that he knows that this world of the Fae exists. Will he introduce himself to the tribes? There's tribes on this island. Will the valley become safe? Will the tribal people want to come back to the valley? So, he stabbed the shadow beast with the sword. It shattered into a million pieces. The shadow has been destroyed, or at least this main shadow that he fought. Are there other shadows? We don't know. That sort of thing. Once you get a taste, you never go back. Exactly. It's all about the adventure. All about the adventure. All right. All right, and this is what we're going to do every Sunday. And that's it. Only the shadow knows. Only the shadow knows. So next week, we'll have another bedtime stories. We'll tell another story. Either we'll revisit this world or we'll tell a completely different story. I usually go back to the VOD and make a couple notes if I want to revisit a story. Absolutely. I agree, Rock. I agree. We do like to go and revisit the different protagonists that we've created. When we've created a compelling world, we want to see what else happens in that world and what else can do. I'm glad you did too. It was great to have your feedback and have you help drive the story forward. Vashani, thank you, Galvanic Goose. I think, what is this story called? We need a name. Y'all, let's name this story. Name the story. Then we do time traveling. Screw with me. Time traveling makes things a little difficult. That is true. But it does also make for a very interesting story. So I'm not going to lie. If y'all can think of the hope in the shadows, I like it. Island of 1,000 Shadows. Ooh, I like that too. Island of 1,000 Shadows. Quest for Hope, or something of that nature. I like it. Let's go with that. Island of 1,000 Shadows. It's got that kind of menacing. Really says what's going on there. The hope on the island of 1,000 shadows. There we go. We have it. Or how about just hope? We don't need the hope. We can just say hope. Hope on the island of 1,000 shadows. All right. Let's sing our parting song and go from there. Thank y'all for stopping by. It's been a lot of fun. Once I get a taste for bedtime stories, I really never want to give it up. It's a bit of work. It's a bit of a kind of a, but it's so much, there's so much payoff. Just to have everybody in the chat create the story and have that investment in the story. So I love it. So fill to me the parting glass. Good night and joy be to you all. Good night. Godspeed. And I'll talk to you later. Bye now.